This guide will cover some of the more advanced mechanics in the swapper and how to use them to your advantage in a speedrun setting. First of all, I suggest you change your key bindings to keys you can easily reach, at least pause menu. I have mine set to caps lock. I create clones with space and swap with shift because my aim is more accurate if I don't have to click. When you can't use the swapper to get around, the fastest way to travel is by jumping. You gain more speed from jumping off a downward slope and less speed from an upward slope. Every frame you spend on the ground slows you down, so hold down the jump button to get as much airtime as possible and jump again as soon as you land, unless delaying your jump a little will put you on a downward slope. If you land on the corner of a platform, you can get a small boost in the direction you're going. Putting all this together can save a lot of time, especially in the early game. When you have to use an elevator and you don't have access to the swapper, call the elevator and give yourself a running start to jump onto it and activate it. Give yourself another running start to jump off. When you hold down the clone button, in-game time slows down. This gives the illusion that real time is also slowed down, and then time spent in slow motion isn't as impactful. On top of that, the whole time you're aiming, you're moving slower, so try to spend the least amount of time in slow motion. When you have to swap upwards, it's easier to hit your clone with the swapper beam if you create it diagonally up instead of directly above you. A clone that's directly above you has barely any surface area facing you, and you can easily miss a swap because of that. For reference, look at the size of the gap between the two red beams projecting the clone outline. Creating a clone further away also often gives you a better line of sight. When traveling long distances, try to create clones on the edge of the screen after the camera catches up. The camera moves with you and your cursor, so when you're repeatedly swapping in the same direction, the camera is constantly moving and trying to catch up, which can make aiming a little tricky. It's faster to wait for the camera to catch up to your cursor before swapping again. Swaps often lead you a few steps away from a door, and it's unclear whether it's faster to swap closer or just jump through it. The solution mainly depends on how quick you are at swapping, so you have to get a feel for this yourself, but you won't lose much time either way. It's safer to create clones slightly away from doors to make sure the outline forms, then jump through them. Failure to create clones can add up to a big time loss over the course of the run. There are a few reasons you can fail to create a clone. You can't create clones in blue light, and it's not always clear where the edge is. You can create clones in fading blue light as long as it's closer to being faded out than faded in. If you attempt to create a clone in a checkpoint light, it immediately gets destroyed and you won't be able to swap to it. Similarly, if you're standing in a checkpoint light, clones you attempt to create immediately get destroyed. If you don't hold down the clone button long enough, no clone gets created. There's a cooldown on clone creation, so you can't create clones in quick succession. That cooldown also gets triggered when you swap, which means you can't create a clone immediately after swapping. It's also affected by the slowdown from creating clones and from low gravity sections. This suggests that there's an optimal rhythm when swapping in quick succession. Hold down the clone button just long enough for it to work, swap to your clone, let the camera catch up, repeat. Shooting the swapper beam is pretty lenient. You can shoot it before releasing the clone button and still make the swap if you create the clone before the beam gets to it. Another reason you might fail to create a clone is that you're aiming into a wall. Since the camera slowly catches up to your cursor moves too. It might be positioned correctly one moment, but when you release to create the clone, it may have shifted into the wall. If you aim too low or too high, the outline snaps to the floor or ceiling, to a certain point. This is not true for walls or doors, so it's common to fail creating a clone because you're aiming into a door or through a platform. You might fail to create a clone because you already have 4 active clones. You have to destroy some of them to make room for more. To do that, you can crush them, merge with them, let them fall, make them fall, or make them touch a checkpoint light. If you come into contact with a checkpoint light or swap through it, all your clones get destroyed. Some sections of the game have low gravity. Movement is slowed down in these sections and gives the same illusion as when you hold down the clone button, so don't get fooled into thinking you can take your time. Since time is seemingly slowed down, perception is skewed and you can get caught off guard. You can die from a long fall at low velocity. Many of these sections, the airlocks, are just simple corridors, but failing to create a clone here can lose a lot of time. Airlocks lead to areas of weightlessness where you can't move by traditional means. When you can use the swapper, make sure not to create clones too close to you or too far away. When you're trying to get through doors, make sure you don't swap back to your clones by aiming away from them. When blue light prevents you from creating clones, the faster you mash the swapper beam, the faster you accelerate. Try to make wide turns because sudden turns lose a lot of speed. You push boxes faster if you face away from them. Multiple clones push even faster, but it's usually inefficient to use more than two. Some events end immediately if you restart from checkpoint after activating them. There's no rule as to which events this works with, but it has more uses earlier in the game. You can speed up an elevator if you exit the room after activating it. Avoid the talking rocks whenever possible. It's usually okay to swap through them. If you're jumping, try to be in the air during the slowdown. On longer drops, it's faster to fall down than to swap down. When you're near the bottom, you can speed up the fall by creating a clone near the floor and swapping to it. This is also safer since you don't have to worry about dying to the fall. Improvement comes with knowledge and practice. Getting a good rhythm for swapping helps cut down the time with each swap. You lose time every time you fail to create a clone, and that can happen multiple times per room. It's a big contributor to time loss. It's one of the hardest things to optimize because you need to be sure about every swap, but you still have to go fast. You should use the strats that work for you. If you try to position your clones perfectly, you'll spend more time aiming and slow down, so it will likely not pay off. The easiest and fastest way to improve your time is to be prepared for every room and know what to do as soon as you enter it. Try actively thinking about what's on the other side of every door when you see one. You can lose a lot of time in some rooms if you enter unprepared.